Ok, bon bah alors rebonjour à tout le monde. On va faire un duo avec Cyril pour vous présenter un peu les grands principes. En fait, l'idée c'est de vous présenter les grands principes de la standardisation des données d'expérimentation en phénotypage. Alors, juste, j'avais préparé deux diapos, notamment pour le collègue iranien qui nous connaît pas. Là, on peut aller assez vite. En fait, c'était pour lui dire un peu d'où on venait et pourquoi c'était nous qui organisions cette présentation. Bon, je pense que vous connaissez tous l'URGI et le fait qu'on a comme mission à l'INRA de développer et puis de maintenir un système d'information pour les plantes cultivées, les arbres forestiers et les pathogènes, une partie des pathogènes des plantes cultivées. Et l'idée étant d'être capable d'héberger des données de génétique, de génomique. Et quand on veut faire de la génétique, en général, on a aussi des aspects de phénotypage qui sont très importants à relier à des données de marquage moléculaire, de génomique, etc. Donc c'est un peu dans ce cadre-là on a commencé à s'intéresser à la standardisation des données de phénotypage et on le fait dans un cadre international. On a beaucoup travaillé ces aspects dans un cadre européen à travers nos travaux dans deux infrastructures. L'infrastructure européenne de bioinformatique qui s'appelle Elixir et une autre infrastructure européenne de phénotypage qui maintenant s'appelle Emphasis. Et puis, on l'a travaillé aussi au niveau international. Et là, notre projet pilote, ça a été beaucoup le projet de la WIT Initiative et le projet de système d'information pour le blé au niveau international. Et donc, toutes ces infrastructures, en fait, ont un objectif commun, qui est de petit à petit être capable de développer un écosystème de systèmes d'information qui serait fair, c'est-à-dire où toutes les données seraient findable, c'est-à-dire facile à trouver, accessible, où on peut réellement accéder à la donnée ou savoir comment on peut accéder à la donnée, interopérable, où on est capable de lier des données hétérogènes entre elles de la façon la plus automatisée possible, et réutilisable, c'est-à-dire qu'on a suffisamment de contexte pour pouvoir réutiliser les données après qu'elles aient été produites et hors de leur premier contexte de production. Donc en fait, tout ce que je vais vous raconter aujourd'hui, c'est des travaux qu'on a menés, ou des principes plutôt, ou qu'on a établis de façon assez collective et dans des groupes de travail donc européens et internationaux. Ce que je voulais vous dire aussi, c'est que ce sont des principes qui peuvent continuer à évoluer et en particulier en lien avec les retours qu'on a des utilisateurs et des communautés qui produisent les données et qui les réutilisent. Donc voilà, vous serez vraiment bienvenus à participer à ces communautés de discussion si ça vous intéresse dans le futur. Donc, pourquoi est-ce qu'on voudrait standardiser des données de phénotypage? Alors, pour rendre n'importe qui capable de réutiliser ces données après que vous les ayez produites, soit vous-même 20 ans après, soit d'autres gens qui ne les ont pas du tout produites. Et donc pour ça, il faut associer toujours les jeux de données à ce qu'on appelle des métadonnées, qui décrivent en fait pourquoi on a obtenu ces données, qui les a obtenues, dans quel contexte, pourquoi faire et comment. Euh, L'autre L'autre objectif qui sous-tend un peu tout ce que je vais vous raconter, c'est aussi la capacité à rendre ces données euh, interopérables avec d'autres données acquises à côté. Et ça repose, et ce, de façon la plus automatique possible. Et en fait, l'interopérabilité, elle repose en général sur la capacité à identifier de façon unique euh, des concepts ou des objets dans les données qui sont un peu pivots et qui permettent de faire ce lien entre les données. Donc, juste en dessous, sur cette diapositive, vous voyez un peu des exemples que je vous montre d'interopérabilité. Donc, par exemple, si on veut lier des données de phénotypage à des données de génotypage, finalement, l'objet un peu pivot, qu'il faut identifier de la même façon dans les deux jeux de données, c'est le cultivar ou l'accession, qui a été phénotypé d'un côté, génotypé de l'autre. Si on veut relier des données de phénotypage à des profils climatiques ou des profils de sol, finalement l'objet pivot qui sera vraiment super important pour relier ces deux jeux de données, ça va être la localisation géographique et probablement aussi le jour ou l'heure à laquelle ces données ont été obtenues. Si on veut relier des données de phénotypage qui ont été obtenues par plusieurs laboratoires dans différents endroits, eh bien, suivant les questions qu'on se pose en fait, et pourquoi est-ce qu'on veut agréger ces données, on a finalement pas mal de pivots possibles. Les variables qui ont été mesurées pour faire ce phénotypage, les cultivars qui ont été impliqués, et peut-être aussi les localisations, suivant qu'on veut maximiser la diversité des environnements ou au contraire essayer de la contrôler. Donc il y a différentes façons très complémentaires. En général, on les met un peu toutes en œuvre en même temps, qui sont utilisées pour standardiser des données, quelles qu'elles soient, hein, pas que les données de phénotypage. Il y a des systèmes, voilà, des systèmes de checklist finalement un peu global sur toutes les informations qui devraient rester associées à un jeu de données pour lui donner du sens à n'importe qui l'a pas obtenu et qui est pas au courant de qui ne sait pas comment ce jeu avait été obtenu. On peut aussi utiliser des dictionnaires de vocabulaire contrôlés pour d'échelle, ou quand ces vocabulaires sont un petit peu plus évolués, c'est-à-dire qu'il y a des liens entre différents éléments de ce vocabulaire, des liens un peu sémantiques. On appelle ça ontologie. Donc ce sont différents types de dictionnaires qui peuvent être également utilisés. Donc vous en connaissez peut-être certains. On va parler, Cyril vous parlera en détail de la cropontologie. Je pense que beaucoup d'entre vous qui manipulez des données génétiques ou génomiques connaissez la gynontologie. Beaucoup d'entre vous doivent manipuler les échelles BBCH pour les stades de développement des plantes, etc. Donc ça, ce sont des différents types de vocabulaire contrôlés ou d'ontologie utilisables, ou d'échelles formalisées. Euh, Ensuite, il y a un élément qui est très important, qui sont les identifiants uniques, et ça c'est extrêmement important pour les objets pivots en particulier. Donc c'est pareil, vous avez certainement été amené à en manipuler certains, des identifiants de gènes, des identifiants d'accession, de traits, pour vos publications, il y a les PubMed ID ou des DOI, etc. Et enfin, on peut aussi standardiser les formats de fichiers qu'on échange entre nous pour faciliter leur réutilisation. Donc vous connaissez certains formats standards pour des données génomiques, comme le format VCF. Il y a d'autres formats standards pour la formalisation d'expériences, quelles qu'elles soient, par exemple ISATAB. Et puis, vous pouvez avoir des formats qui sont définis dans une communauté donnée. Donc, par exemple, à l'INRA, ceux qui veulent soumettre des données à GNPIS, finalement, les formats de soumission dans GNPIS peuvent être aussi un format standard dans une communauté donnée. Alors là maintenant, je vais essayer de vous présenter un peu le travail qui a été fait et qui est pas si vieux que ça en fait. Je pense que les travaux ont commencé en 2011 ou 2012, voilà 12-13 dans le cadre d'un projet européen qui a eu comme un de ses objectifs de développer un standard de métadonnées pour les données de phénotypage. Et donc ce standard a déjà pas mal évolué depuis sa première forme qui a dû être publiée en 2013 ou 14 ou quelque chose comme ça. Et on en est déjà à deux autres versions où on essaye de continuer à l'améliorer. Donc ces formats standards, hein, il y en a un qui est très connu, c'est un peu sur le même modèle que le MIAM, qui était le format, le Minimum Information About c'était quoi? Transcription. C'était pour les données de transcription. Donc là, c'est Minimum Information About Phenotyping Experiment. Donc c'est vraiment pour les données de phénotypage, les expériences de phénotypage. Donc comme je vous le disais, ce format enfin, a été développé et il continue à être maintenu par une communauté internationale intéressée dans le phénotypage des plantes. Donc on a consulté vraiment au cours de ces travaux, ont été consultés une communauté vraiment large de sélectionneurs ou de biologistes provenant des CIGI, de l'INRA, d'autres instituts de recherche européens. L'infrastructure européenne pour le phénotypage des plantes, donc EPPN Emphasis, a contribué à ces travaux et les a vraiment soutenus très fort. Pareil pour l'infrastructure Elixir de bioinformatique, mais on est aussi en contact avec des collègues américains de Planteome, qui est une plateforme qui essaye de créer un système un système cohérent d'ontologie relié entre elles, finalement, si je résume ce qu'ils essayent de faire. Voilà, des initiatives des CIGIS, etc. Donc vous pouvez suivre en fait les avancées de ces travaux sur le site web miap.org. Et ce que je voulais vous dire aussi, c'est que ces recommandations, on les intègre au fur et à mesure dans le format de soumission. Donc c'est un format Excel, hein, ce sont des fichiers Excel de soumission de données de phénotypage dans GNPIS. Et vous avez l'adresse web si vous souhaitez vous aider en fait de ce fichier Excel pour vous faire votre propre format à vous. Donc je vais pas rentrer dans les détails de chaque ligne parce que et je vous ai dans le petit dossier que je vous ai envoyé hier, je vous ai mis la dernière version de travail qu'on va bientôt soumettre pour acceptation ou révision au comité miap.org. Euh, donc vous verrez que les guidelines sont assez longues, enfin il y a une série de champs très très longues. Il y a deux choses que je voudrais vous dire en préliminaire. Il faut regarder les champs donc les champs marqués d'une étoile sont obligatoires. Il n'y en a pas beaucoup. On a été vraiment très très sévère pour garder un champ obligatoire. Mais donc du coup, ces champs obligatoires sont vraiment obligatoires. Ils sont vraiment importants. Et après, tous les autres ne sont pas obligatoires. Ils n'ont pas été rendus obligatoires, ce qui ne veut pas dire qu'ils ne sont pas importants. Donc je pense qu'il faut avoir un œil critique là-dessus et essayer vraiment de se projeter sur le choix qu'on fait dans les métadonnées qu'on va garder, euh, un choix un peu critique en fonction du type d'expérimentation qu'on mène et des informations qu'on aimerait trouver le jour où on voudrait réutiliser ces données. Mais donc les champs obligatoires sont vraiment obligatoires. Donc il y a une première section qui concerne la description du projet d'expérience. Euh, et ah, voilà. Est-ce que vous me réentendez? Est-ce que vous me réentendez tous?
Alors, est-ce que vous entendez Anne-Françoise? Est-ce que vous m'entendez moi? Moi, je l'entendais bien, mais j'ai eu des messages. Donc, Jean-Paul et Anthony, est-ce que vous m'entendez bien moi? Est-ce que vous entendez bien Anne-Françoise?
Je refais un essai, vous me dites?
Attends une seconde, on va peut-être juste là, on attend la réponse de Jean-Paul et Anthony. Jean- Ouais, c'est ce que je fais. Ok, et du coup, donc Jean-Paul, c'est bon. Du coup, Anne-Françoise,
Ouais.
non? Parle Anne-Françoise?
Ouais, du coup, je continue, ça va? Non, Anthony m'entend pas. Anthony a l'air de dire qu'il n'entend pas. Zut.
Ah, c'est bizarre.
Ouais.
Donc Anthony, tu n'entends euh,
Mais Anthony, il a quitté son siège, du coup, dégoûté.
c'est peut-être un truc pour mon casque ou je sais pas.
Ouais.
Donc Jean-Paul, tu m'entends bien, mais tu n'entends pas Françoise.
Ah,
Ça,
ça se complique.
Mm, mm. Euh,
C'est bizarre qu'il puisse t'entendre toi et pas moi.
Ouais, c'est très bizarre. Du coup, je vois pas trop comment faire parce que si on passe par mon micro. Et du coup, Jean-Paul, tu n'as pas entendu Anne-Françoise depuis le début ou ça a coupé un moment donné? Oui. Non, je crois que son micro fonctionne pas. Ok, donc
Ah, ça c'est dommage. Ici, là? Ouais. Jean-Paul, est-ce que tu m'entends mieux là? J'ai monté le son.
du coup, Anne-Françoise est en train de refaire un test. C'est pas mieux.
Est-ce que tu m'entends mieux, Jean-Paul? J'ai augmenté le son.
On va laisser répondre dans le chat.
Mais s'il m'a pas entendu, je crois qu'il faut que tu répondes.
Oui, du coup, Jean-Paul, est-ce que c'est mieux ou est-ce que c'est toujours pareil? Tu n'entends que moi? Ah, qu'il y a quelque chose mais très faible.
Alors, soit je monte mon casque à fond.
Non, mais les autres, moi je t'entends fort et je pense que les autres t'entendent fort. Mais c'est bizarre si Jean-Paul tu
Alors,
m'entends.
du coup, Jean-Paul, peut-être ce que tu peux faire, c'est sur ton menu à toi
Attends,
de ton ordinateur, il y a normalement, il y a un petit machin son haut-parleur. Et moi, au début, j'entendais rien aussi et il fallait juste que je monte ça à fond.
du coup, si, ouais, mais si Jean-Paul tu m'entends fort, ou si tu m'entends faible aussi, c'est qu'il faut que tu montes ton son général. Si, je pense que Jean-Paul m'entend bien, mais juste moi, panne Françoise.
C'est ça qui est bizarre.
C'est ça qui est très bizarre. À la rigueur, peut-être Jean-Paul, peut-être le plus simple. Non, toi c'est fort, ok. Du coup, bah, peut-être le plus simple, c'est tu te déconnectes et tu te reconnectes. Peut-être que ça peut peut-être faire quelque chose de positif. Ok, on t'attend.
Anthony, t'avais le même problème?
Donc Anthony, est-ce que ton problème est réglé? Je ne sais pas. Anthony, tu nous entends bien?
Et
Peut-être
ben,
qu'il
je
est...
pense qu'il essaye de faire. Ouais.
Ça peut être instable, hein, malheureusement. La Silio, c'est un peu le problème. Mais en général, quand ça marche, ça continue à marcher, donc c'est bizarre. Donc Jean-Paul, je vois que tu es revenu.
Alors, est-ce que, est-ce que tu m'entends mieux? Ouais, c'est parfait cette fois. Super. Bon, bah maintenant on attend on attend Anthony Klein qui a fait la même manip que toi et,
Ouais,
et on repart.
désolé pour tout le monde, il y a des petits problèmes techniques, malheureusement, récurrents avec cet outil. On va peut-être pas attendre trop longtemps. Alors Anthony
Ah,
arrive,
ça y est, il arrive.
espérons que ça marche. Anthony, est-ce que tu m'entends?
Et surtout, est-ce que tu m'entends aussi?
Est-ce que tu entends François, surtout?
Ouais, voilà, c'était ça. Il y a Classio qui filtrait ma voix. Non, mais c'est dingue ça. J'y crois pas.
Enfin, pas chez tout le monde, c'est ça qui est bizarre.
Sélectivement en plus. Ouais, c'est ça. Je l'ai saoulé.
Continue, est-ce que tu pourras nous mettre les choses dans le chat? Je te...
Bon, du coup, je continue. Ah, non, ça y est. Il y a la caméra qui arrive. Et du coup, Anthony, c'est bon ou pas?
Ah, super.
Super,
Bon, allez.
impeccable. Donc on continue. Donc on reprend. Donc je commençais à présenter un peu les grandes sections d'information du MyAPI, donc qui est un standard de métadonnées pour les données de phénotypage. Et donc il faut un peu le prendre comme un guide sur les métadonnées à garder, euh, enfin liées à un jeu de données de phénotypage. Donc la première section concerne la description du projet de phénotypage, et en fait ce qu'on a fait dans la version du MyAPI que je vous ai joint, donc dans le dossier que je vous ai envoyé hier, on a vraiment essayé de revoir ces métadonnées en les calant le plus possible sur les métadonnées qui sont demandées euh, lorsqu'on soumet un dataset pour avoir un DOI attaché à ce dataset. On s'est beaucoup aligné sur les métadonnées demandées lorsqu'on demande un DOI. Voilà. Bon. Et donc du coup, si vous suivez en fait ce standard, ben, quelque part vous êtes un peu prêt le jour où vous voulez déposer une demande de DOI. Ce que je vous encourage à faire quand vous avez des jeux de données de phénotypage. La deuxième section concerne la localisation de l'expérimentation, donc décrire un peu le lieu où a été faite cette expérimentation, quand elle a été faite notamment au champ, ça peut être important pour lier ces informations ensuite a posteriori avec des données climatiques ou des données de sol.
Du coup, Anne-Françoise, il y a Mohamed qui s'est connecté. Hello, Mohamed. Do you hear us? Mohamed, do you hear us or not? To start your microphone, you have to click on the
Do you
item
hear me?
near the end at top left
Do you hear me?
near the webcam, and you could also
Hello?
talk
Okay.
in the chat here.
Okay. Hello to you. Hello to you.
Ah,
And nice to see you.
Yeah.
yes, yes we do. Hello.
We already
Okay. So sorry, Mohammed. We already started. Well, let's say perhaps 20 minutes ago. So I was describing quickly the standard for phenotyping data, which is called MyAPI. And its main section, maybe I can go back very quickly because I was just starting. So the first section is about the project and the information which are required to be kept in these guidelines are very close to what would be required for asking a DOI. When you ask for a DOI for a data set, then you would have the same kind of information to give. So the idea was to be compliant or consistent between several standards. The second main section is about where the phenotyping experiment has been done. So the location. And this information is very important if you want to link your phenotyping data to climatic data, soil data, or that stuff. That kind of information. So the timing is important for climatic data, for instance, and the longitude or latitude is very important to locate the place where it occurred. As I told you, GPS location and timing are really important concept because they help to link several data together. So they have also to be as standardized as possible. And in Europe, there is a directive called the INSPIRE directive, which try to specify what would be the standard in that matter. Personally, I find their description not very clear. But so whatever the system you use, we didn't propose anyone because we don't understand exactly what is the best one. But be consistent between your latitude and your longitude, use the same. And you have also application that exist if you want to convert from one kind of GPS coordinates to another. I give you one example of. But this is important, and you have to check that your information is correct, whatever the system you use. The next section, which is also crucial, is the identification of the plant material. And the idea is to really be able to keep the information about the accession, the identification, the precise identification of the accessions that were used, that were phenotyped. So again, we did a lot of work to try to align the specification of the MAIA-P with the multi-crop passport data standard, which is the GenBank standard for the identification of the accessions. So I give you here the link if you want to have more information about the MCPD. And really all the mandatory information which are required in the MAIA-P are the same than in the MCPD. And they are really mandatory. So I would like to spend a little bit of time just to explain to you how does this system of information work, because it is really important. And it is important to be able to link phenotyping data with genotyping data, genomic data, etc. on the same accessions. So for the plant material, at the level of the accession or cultivars or varieties, the GenBank managers have been used for a long time to use a standard which is called multi-crop passport data. And the principle of the identification is based on three information which have to be present. First, you have to identify the GenBank or the lab who is responsible for giving the accession number. So you have in second the accession number, and this accession number has to be unique in the registry of the GenBank or the lab. Right? And then you need the species also, and for the species. So the GenBank manager are really used to that. They all have a system of accession number, and if you work with a GenBank, and if you get the accession from them, please take all this information from them, because they know it. And if you have your own collection, I think it is really important that you develop your own registry for each species, and for your own lab have really a system of unique number. More recently, so as you see, this system of unique number is dependent of the GenBank. To make it unique at the international level, we have to add the name of the gene bank and the name of the species, which makes a lot of text. So it is not really machine readable, you know. See, it should be theoretically unique at the international level, but it's not really machine readable. So recently, the FAO recommended to ask for a DOI or to link a DOI to each action. And DOI is a DOI number, so it is an informatic identifier, which can be registered by DataCite, and it is really internationally completely unique, and it is machine readable. So, so this is for the accession. And then when you are doing experiments, sometimes, so you get an accession from a gene bank, and then you might derive a material from it. Either you do your own seed lot, or you take a sample from this accession, and this is what you describe. You can make a microplot from this accession, and this is what you describe. So we need also to describe this object sometimes, and usually the system of unique identifier is given by a lab or an infrastructure. And you can also make it machine readable using URI. We are working at the European level with the ABI and EMBL, perhaps to use their database. The biosample database is where they store all the sample for which they get some genomic data. So each time you submit some a genomic data, you have to describe the material source, and they store this information into biosample, and they give it a unique ID. So we also are working with them to align all these specifications. But for you, you don't have to care about that. I think really for you, the important thing is to get the accession number, the precise accession number, and work with your gene bank manager for that. And if you derive your own sample, have your own consistent system of naming, and keep it all right in your metadata. Okay, so yes, I've said all of this, but then it's written. You can keep track on it. What I would like to say to you is that all these systems and this alignment between all these different systems are quite recent, and it is a good time point to start to take good practices on that. The next section are describing the environment of the phenotyping experiment. So I haven't kept all the fields. The idea of this section is that you describe the environmental parameter that can be measured, but which are not modified as an experimental factor. So they remain constant, or you don't try to monitor them. It's just that you measure them, and it's cofactors or stuff like that. The next section are more about the treatment. So how you will modify the environment, the biotic or abiotic treatment modification. So treatment is about biotic and abiotic changes between two samples that you will like to compare. And you can also have some treatment on the plant material that you can describe in sample collection processes or management. And then the next section is about the experimental design. To really describe your experiment, the different plot, subplot, microplot, or whatever, and the type of statistical design you want to achieve, the replication, and so on. And finally, the last one, and I will stop here because it will be described more in detail afterwards by Cyril, is about the description of the type of measurement you will do, what kind of trait you try to address, and with which kind of measurement. And also, we have tried to be compliant with the trait dictionary format of the crop ontology. But maybe we can stop here and make a first set of questions, and then Cyril will go in details into this, the way of formatting the description of these measurements.
Okay, so if you have questions, I will give you the mic, and I think there was a question from Claudie, and Sophie replied. The question from Claudie was: Is it possible to get DOI for derived plant material?
So no, the FAO. Well, so the FAO doesn't want to put a DOI with their own system on derived material, but we can do it if we want, or we can put URI, other kind of, well, they are similar, but URI will be perhaps less persistent if you have no engagement of keeping it for, I think the engagement for DOI is 20 years, or 10 years?
10 years.
So it, well, URI are given by database, or more community database perhaps. But we do give URI in our system because we need it for lots or derived material.
Is there another question? By you can use the mic or by the chat. No, if there is no other question, Cyril will continue the presentation.
And now, can you hear me? Okay, so much better. Let's begin. So once we have seen this overview on the standards and on the MyAPI standards, what we are now going to describe in more details is how you identify and correctly describe the variables you are using to make your experiment. So this is done through trait dictionaries for phenotyping experiment. And those phenotyping variables, which are the description of what you are measuring, are a way to link to a phenotype experiment, to QTL, GWAS, and other phenotyping experimental parameters. The important thing to keep in mind, and that we will describe more thoroughly, is that a phenotyping variable is made of a trait, protocol, or method, and a scale. This is an approach that has been formalized by the crop ontology, and especially the crop ontology trait dictionary format, TDV5, which is available on cropontology.org website. Another important thing to keep in mind is that the larger the community that use a dictionary, the more reusable are the data, the more reality proved are the usability of those variables, and therefore more and more people come gather around this way of describing the variables. Therefore, it is very important not to hesitate to reuse existing controlled vocabularies. And most of the time, we have always seen that either with our own vocabularies or with other people's vocabularies, the coordinators, the managers are really willing to welcome new contributions. So, phenotyping ontologies are coming either from the CROP ontology, which is coordinated by Elisabeth Arnaud, the PI, and it's not only a repository of ontologies, it's also a framework to create standard ontologies for notating phenotype observations in breeding. Sorry for the images, I don't know what happened. I just spotted that they are very bad. Sorry. So from this CROP ontology approach, we have implemented it and applied it to the INRA ontology, which are published in the GNPIS portal. So on this first URL here. And although there is a versioning system allowing to access to work in progress ontologies through a GitLab instance here. So before going in more detail on what are the different ontologies, I would like to more precisely describe this idea of trait annotation, a trait method on scale. So here you see this data matrix, which is roughly the kind of thing that you are manipulating, in which you've got one column from your GEMPLAS for your plant, your plot identification, and then a series of columns for the different variables you are observing. For instance, pH and pH2, which are 8 of the plant, the color of the grain, which is G-col, and GY, which is a grain yield. This is roughly understandable for the person who did this, but of course absolutely not understandable even in 5 years, even for the person who did this. So first question, what is the observation about? The trait. So here we've got 3 traits, which are the height of the plant, which is shared between the 2 first columns, color of the grain and grain yield. Then how is the trait observed? Here we see we've got with a measuring tape for the 2 plant height, estimated visually for the color and calculated for the yield. This is the method. And last, the scale. So here we at least understand why we've got pH and pH2, because pH is a height in centimeters, while pH2 is a height with a notation scale, 1 being short, 2 medium, 3 tall, with, of course, a decision mechanism to know what is the scale we have to assign to each observation. So the consequence we've got from this is that each variable has this triplet of trait method on scale, and this is what we have tried to present in a very biologist-friendly way in this ontology browser you've got here, for which you see that there is a nest presence variable here, which has its trait. Sorry again, it's impossible to read. Its method and its scale, and it's really usually easy to see. So now I would like to go in more detail on the trait dictionary template and how it can be used and to add new variables to an existing ontology, or to create a new ontology if you don't find what you need in the existing possibilities. So for this, we are going to work on the width variable example. The idea is that we've got a variable which is above ground dry matter per area at antithesis. So for this, the trait is above ground dry matter per area. The method is a direct measure, and the scale is grams by square meters. So the trait template v5 is available both in the archives that Anne-Françoise sent us this morning, and also at these two URLs, there is also a curation guidelines PDF that has been built by the crop ontology people, and that is available here. So the variable fields for the trait template, there are quite a lot of them, but in fact only 4 of them are mandatory. The identification, it's the same thing that with the germplasm, with the accessions. We've got to have an ID which is unique and consistent across any system. So ideally, it must be a URI. Crop ontology provides such a system. Then you've got the variable name, the language, because this system allows you to have a single ontology either in French, in English, in Portuguese, and so on, and the crop, which allow you to define the name of the ontology you are dealing with. There are also a set of 3 recommended fields, which is the variable synonym, the growth stage, and the institution. I will go in further details on those later. For the trait section, it's very simple because in fact you've got only 3 mandatory fields, which are the ID, the name, and the class. We'll see later what the class means. And the entity attribute, which are recommended. Method, once again, not a lot of mandatory things, and same for scale. You can be very minimal to get useful description of your variable. So if we go on more detail, for the variable section, here you've got the a screenshot from our ontology browser with a zoom on the variable section. And just below, you've got here the trait dictionary that correspond to this above ground dry matter per area at antithesis variable. So to describe more precisely why variable synonyms are recommended, you see that with the variable name, you've got in fact the short name, which is agdm.z25, etc., which is what you will have in your Excel sheet header, in your data matrix header. And the variable synonym is a human-friendly expansion of this short name, which is so the above ground dry matter and so on. So for the trait, as I said, only 3 of them, only 3 fields are important. The trait class is the one that allow you to organize your ontology in different sections: agronomical traits, biochemical traits, abiotic or abiotic stress traits, and so on. And what I would like to show you here is 2 recommended fields, the entity and the attribute. The entity is a way for the biologists, the data curators that create the ontology, to state very precisely what is being observed. Here it's either a whole plant for the post-anthesis nitrogen absorption, or the leaf for leaf rolling, green leaf area index, and so on. The interest for this is mainly for us on the information system side, because it will allow us very easily to search and to reason, to treat the data, and to get all the variables dealing with leaf, for instance, without relying on simple text matching. So the next section is the variable section. For this example, we've got a simple direct measure name. The interesting thing I would like to point is the method reference section here. While it's empty in this specific example, It could be a URL to a PDF, a field book, something that describe how you are supposed to do this measure, and you can even precise, of course, the page on which you will have the full description, the full protocol of measure. This allows to avoid copy-pasting information that are in non-publication inside the ontology. Last but not least, of course, so the scale, which is here gram by square meters. And the important thing is that a scale can be either a unit, like in the first example, or a notation scale, which is, for instance, 1 to 9 for disease resistance node. With each of the category, 1 to 9 is in this example, which can have a simple string stating that 1 is resistance, and possibly with a few descriptive words to help people in the field understand if they have to choose category 1, 2, or anything else. So, this being said, I just would like to spot a few ontologies that are of interest for a few species. I've spotted only ontologies that exist currently in English and are published. This is the reason why there is one ontology for P, for protein crop ontologies, that I haven't listed here. But if you are considering about working on this, I encourage you very strongly to directly speak with Christophe Leconte and Anthony here. So, with ontology, there are in fact two ontologies. The first one being the INRA phenotype ontology, available in GNPIS and published there, and the CIMMYT weight ontology, which is available on crop ontology. There is a strong collaboration between those two ontologies. So far, it hasn't been possible to merge them simply because CIMMYT and French network don't do their measures the same way. And so far, aligning those two variable systems would have been very complicated. This might change quite soon. So on the INRA weight ontology, it's coordinated by Thomas Letellier with the reference as Jacques Le Gouy for the scientific coordination. It is used in several experimental network projects, including BreedWeight at the French level, and will be at the European level. On the other side, the CIMMYT ontology is coordinated by Rosemary Shrestha from CIMMYT and is used in the CGIAR experimental networks and in the breeding management system. They are both roughly the same size, 200 more variables. They can include quite elaborated variables like near green seeker variables. And as I said, there is truly a good collaboration between those two. So the second ontology I would like to point is the grape ontology, which is available on our site, on our website, and on the cropontology.org website. I coordinate it with mainly Eric Duchesne, which is a scientific coordinator, and it is used at INRA and in phenology networks. It includes also a lot of reference variables taken, for instance, from the OIV, which is the Organisation Internationale de la Vigne et du Vin. Another important ontologies, especially if you are considering working with perennial plants, is the trees ontology. In fact, there are two of them now. The woody plant ontology, once again published both on GNPIS and crop ontology, is being coordinated by Celia Michotet from INRA. It is used, and in fact it has been elaborated from experimental networks like Plantacomp in France, so a lot of forestry experiment all across the French territory. And It has been improved through a collaboration with a lot of European colleagues within the Elixir project. It is applied to quercus, to populus, to pilus, and other species. And the interesting thing is that other people, for instance, for working on olive tree, are very strongly considering its reuse for their own data publication. It has 2043 variables, and it has been developed with the idea to extend it to fruit trees, not to narrow it only to forestry. Which leads me to the second ontology, the Prunus ontology. In fact, it has been created in 2011, so a long time ago. It has been at the beginning created by Émilie Balzemin and now coordinated by José Quirio Garcia at INRA. And it was mainly meant for the Prunus French gene bank. So it's very small, it has only 30 variables, and we are considering its merge with the woody plant ontology, but we haven't seriously begun the discussion on this so far. So if you are working on tree ontologies, consider woody plant ontology, and we will be happy to add new terms if necessary. To finish this rough and quick overview, if you're working on maize, on Solanaceae, we advise to have a look at the crop ontologies that exist on those species, maize crop ontology and soil crop ontology, coordinated by CGIAR's people, and therefore used in CGIARs, in the breeding management system. And their use for Elixir and INRA are under study. I think that Wageningen also is involved in the soil crop ontology. This being said, I think I'm giving back the show to Anne-Françoise.
C'est bon.
Ça y est, c'est bon. Yes. So in the among the files I distributed to you yesterday, there is an Excel table which is called the Pheno Data Standard for INRA BRC. And with Sophie Durand, my colleague Sophie Durand, what we have tried to do is to take your favorite species and try to see what are the international trait dictionary which are already existing and that might be relevant to you. I picked up only those which were in the crop ontology portal. And we also looked at the ancient IPGRI descriptors lists. Most of them, you know, were included afterwards in some of these crop ontologies. So they can be also sources of, you know, standard vocabularies if you want to create new variables that you couldn't find. I think most of you know this list from these IPGRI descriptors. And for the INRA fellows who are attending this webinar, I have also made a tentative to-do list to better inform the descriptors we already have in base for the INRA gene banks. Because we started, you know, we integrated this descriptor well before we took the decision to work with the crop ontology format. Maybe the crop ontology format didn't exist at this time. So now we have to curate it and to make them, to put them at the TD5 V5 format. And this is a collective work I would like to do with you. So please look at this Excel file if you are concerned by this question, and we will talk about that in our meeting in November. I would like to finish and summarize a little bit a kind of tentative protocol or to-do list. When you want to start an experiment, what should you do? before or along the experiment. First, get the plant material identification information right. So talk with your favorite gene bank manager. This is something we have tried to organize at the INRA level, which works better and better. But and I think it is very useful for the whole community. If you are your own plant manager, ensure the unicity of the way you identify this plant material. It is very important. For the people who are using accessions, which information is stored in GNPIS in our database, there is the possibility to retrieve the list with all the identifiers automatically. Then the second thing is to set up your list of traits and measurements you want to do and generate your own trait dictionary. So the list of ontology we have tried to give to you is, I hope, will be useful for you to see if there is already an existing variable that has been put into one of these ontology and that you could reuse. And then the only thing you have to do is to retrieve the ontology code and variable code. It's enough and then you can go back to what it was. If it doesn't exist, then you have to gather the data of the missing one at the TDV5 format. So please keep, the variable name, the protocol, and the scale together. It is very important, and it is an information we cannot guess for you. And then the third time is to gather all the rest of the metadata using the MyAPI guidelines. So some information about the project, about the environment, about the setup of the trial. And the important thing is to keep all this information together with the data you will collect. And for the data collection, there are now some tools which are, I think some apps are available online now even. You fill e-books, or you can design your own standard Excel file that will help you, to have your own checklist of what information has to be gathered. And again, the GNPIS submission format can help you perhaps to do this standard Excel file. But this Excel file, the metadata really have to be kept along with the data. It is really important. So I've tried also to, in the additional material that you have been distributed, I've tried to gather some useful tools, several guidelines, standard Excel file. So please look at it. If you have a question on it, we can interact afterwards. I have also in this last slide put two links on two websites that can give you useful links and useful material that could for phenotyping data standardization. And I think now I can stop, and I thank you for your attention, and we will have your question. The last link here is an inquiry, a survey, sorry. It's a survey about this webinar. It's the first time we do a webinar on that subject, so really, if you have remarks, they are much welcome. We would like to do more of it, and we would like them to be more and more useful for the community. So thank you, and now we are listening to you.
Okay, so do you have questions? I think, yeah. Claudie asked if there is a TP grandeur nature, and I think Sophie answered.
Maybe we can organize this in November in the BRC meeting day, but this is something we would like also to organize in a more general point of view at URGI. But then we have to organize a face-to-face meeting, not a webinar. And I think a webinar is a good start for you to start thinking. Perhaps try with this material what you can do, and then we can do some practical, yes, TD, but you know, you having already seen what is not understandable or what is not clear with all the doc. Alors Jean-Paul, moi j'arrive pas à les voir les web.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, I'm
So
Mohammed.
Jean-Paul ask experimental design.
Mohamed était en train de parler. I think.
Oh, sorry.
Please go ahead, and then we will go.
Okay, I ask my question.
Yes, please.
I'm so sorry first for my delay. I expected the webinar at 14 p.m., but I think you started at 1:30, which I received in the email. So I was.
No, I didn't take care of the time difference maybe between our two countries. It may be the point.
Okay, I checked the. Okay, there is.
I'm sorry.
There is not. No. There is not problem, and I just missed the first part of the webinar, and I'm so sorry for that. And again, I think I'm the only English audience in this webinar, so I think I made difficult your work, maybe a little. So I had a question.
No, not at all.
You were okay. When you were talking about soul crop ontology, I want to know which crops belong to Solanaceae. This includes, for example, tomato, eggplants, or crop by crop, or all of the crops together.
Well, I think the Solanaceae crop ontology includes all the Solanaceae. So it's probably more general because I think there is a potato one and there is a Solanaceae crop ontology. So maybe you have to check in details, but I suspect that you should find most of your traits of interest, whatever the Solanaceae species you are working on, in the Solanaceae crop ontology. And if you do not, you can contact the curator of the ontology and suggest, new traits to be added. And Cyril would like to add something.
You have to click, perhaps.
Yeah. Okay, good. Just to add, if you have any doubt on the best ontology to use, either the SIP or the Solanaceae ontology, you can contact Elisabeth Arnaud, the PI, to double check. She will point you to the right people, because the first coordinators for some ontologies can change. So if you don't get any answer to your question by directly contacting the coordinators, please contact her. She will be happy to help you.
Are you okay, Mohammed? Did we answer your question?
I think there is a network problem.
Okay, so Jean-Paul had a question, right? Okay, so yeah, it's about experimental design who do not always use accession referenced in gene banks. So yeah, exactly. So that's why I pointed you two different cases. I said the identification of the material has two possible reference. Either you get it from a gene bank and then you have to retrieve the accession number from the gene bank. It's better. Or you have your own material, which is not, not conserved anywhere else, or it's really your own collection. And then really, the idea is that you have your own numbering system, unique numbering system. Um, this is the only thing I can do. I can say. You can also try to ask for a DOI, I suppose. Nothing forbid you for doing this. If it's really an accession, I think it's worth. But at INRA, I would really advise you to contact us so that we have consistent lists for INRA, even if they are not GenBank linked. We can also store material which is not from GenBanks, and help you to have such DOIs associated with. And then the other case is if you are following also, so you have the accession, and then there is a material derived from the accession that might be, really the object that you phenotype, and then really usually the numbering system is from a single lab or a group of lab, but it's not a gene bank. I don't know if I answer your question. I think this is the best we can do so far. Maybe we will have better thinking later on, but at the moment it is how we propose to work.
So Jean-Paul, it is answering your questions, and also Mohamed, I think you reconnect. Did you hear the Cyril answer also, or not?
Oh, sorry. Actually, I missed my internet connection, so I missed his answer. But there is no problem. I will ask his email or something. We don't have time.
No. So what Cyril was telling you is that if you have a doubt about the best ontology to use, you still can contact the coordinator of the crop ontology, which is Elisabeth Arnaud, and she would point you to the best one and to a contact if you want to add new variables to an ontology. You can also go through us, and we would put you into contact if you struggle a bit.
Okay, thank you very much.
I copy pasted the email of Elisabeth Arnaud is in the chat.
And you also have the link to the survey, so it's for all of you in the chat. It's a clickable link.
It's in French. The survey is in French, I think.
So yeah, I'm sorry. This is something we'll have. So Mohammed, don't be. It was really not a problem to do it in English. In fact, we saw that we still have a lot of improvement to do if we want to be able to do international webinars. First of all, having a webinar system in English. First step.
So Jean-Paul answered.
Okay. Yes. Yes. Okay, do you hear me?
Yes? Yes, we hear you, Mohammed. Do you have...
In fact, it's a little hard. In fact, it's a little hard for me, so I think it's maybe hard for you too. So if anybody doesn't have any question, I can ask a more general question about phenotyping. I think the age of phenotyping is going to start. I mean, I remember some time ago there were a lot of problems with genotyping, but in this time, the scientific community have resolved a lot of problems with the genotyping, and for me at least, I'm a plant breeder. Phenotyping is much more important and much more difficult in the moment. What do you think about that?
Yes, so indeed, I think that there is a big community of people, well, a big community of scientists now which are trying to tackle the problem of phenotyping, because you are right, this is probably, it is still not really high throughput, even if a lot of methods, higher throughput methods are currently being developed. And doing genotyping without any phenotyping is of no use, because what you want is to predict one by the other, so you need both. And so yes, I think since, well, during the last let's say 6 years, there has been a lot of emphasis on phenotyping, organizing phenotyping data, etc. Perhaps another characteristic of phenotyping data is that, well, the current thinking of the international community is that this kind of data will remain distributed. We do not foresee at the moment a big archive gathering all the worldwide data for phenotyping like we had for genomic data, for instance. And so I think there is a big push on standardizing this kind of data, because we know it will come from several sources, and it is really important to be able to gather all of these sources together without too many hurdles. Okay, so now maybe if there is not much, are there any burning question? Okay, so I think most of you have got to go. So thank you, all of you. Thank you for your returns. And well, anyway, this is something we will try to redo regularly and improve it. If you have any remarks on it that would help us to improve it, we will take care of it. And yes, we will try to organize also maybe more like more hands-on session where we can work on your own data, help you with your own data. So goodbye and have a good afternoon.
Thank you everybody, and feel free to send your emails if you have questions or requests. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.